and welcome back to Blind Inspiration Cast. My name is Colleen Connor, and this is my seeing eye dog, Joplin. Currently has a latte. I wanted to share my experience with recent air travel because the rules for service animals significantly changed in January of 2021, due in part to the stories you may have heard about where people brought their emotional support peacock on the plane and dog fights were breaking out in the airport and people were getting bit on airplanes. And I'm gonna kind of explain about those rules and how I handled it in this video. I am not a lawyer and this is not legal advice. However, I am blind, and as mentioned, I do have a seeing eye dog, Joplin. So according to federal law, this is based on the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act in the United States. A service animal is defined as an animal that has been specially trained to help someone with a disability, with a task. And it is only recognized as a dog or a miniature horse. If you do not have a disability, you do not have a service animal. If you have any other animal, it's not considered a service animal. So if you have a turkey and it was trained to help you with a task, it's not federally recognized as a service animal. If you have a pet or a dog that was trained to support you emotionally, or you just love it and you want to take it everywhere, it's not recognized because it's not trained to do a task for you. However, some people have disabilities that might not be noticeable. So it's not always a guide dog or a mobility assistance dog that you might be thinking of. Some people can train their service dogs to remind them to take their medication or stop them from doing an unwanted behavior or alert to a medical condition, diabetes, seizures, stuff like that. So when you take a service animal out in public, there is only two things that a professional, a staff member can ask you. One, is that a service animal required because of a disability? And two, what work or task has the animal been trained to perform? There's resource links for this in the description. If anybody gives you a problem, you can pull up this document on your phone and just show it to them. They can't ask you to have the dog demonstrate what it's gonna do. They can't, nothing like that. Now, you may have a service dog or a service horse, but if it is presenting a danger or is disruptive, staff members, they can ask you to leave. Just like an unruly customer, if your service animal hurts someone, you are liable for the injuries. One of the main problems is that these behaviors become an issue for those of us who have legitimate service animals when other people say that their animal is a service animal and it's actually a pet or an emotional support animal. Emotional support animals do have protections depending on the state or the area that you're in. They can, from lease laws, emotional support animals, ESAs, are not considered service animals because they are not specifically trained to perform a task for someone with a disability. ESAs are not protected by the ADA, so they can be legally denied entry to public places. Another thing is there is no such thing as a registry for service animals. There is also no such thing as a certified service animal. If someone is telling you that their service animal is certified, it probably means that they went on the internet to a random organization and they paid some money to get a certificate about their dog being cool And they might even get sent like a vest. You can just buy a vest. And if people say they're on a registry, it's that company's registry. It's not like a national or federal registry. Joplin and I, for instance, I do have an ID for Joplin that was provided by the Seeing Eye. However, it's just kind of for ease of access. Like if someone is really giving you a problem, you can show an ID. It might be faster, but you're not required to have an identification card or any kind of certificate that you carry around for your service animal. You are never required to pay to make your service animal official. These companies that I mentioned, none of them have the authority or the backing of the ADA. If you look up one of these certification registry companies, they will say that you get this certification to legitimize you, or it helps you like explain yourself and legitimize your dog. It's normally about $50 or so. They do not check anything. They're not checking the behavior of your dog or certifying the vaccinations of your dog or behavior as a service animal. They're not evaluating that in any kind of way. The reason this matters and that it sucks is that sometimes now people are expecting you to have a certificate or an ID or a specific vest, which again is not required. So people who have this, there's been so many of them that now some staff members, and they'll ask you for a certification, and it's like, you don't need that. Like, that's not a thing. Now, it is possible to train a pet to be a service animal. And many people do this. They have a disability and they train the pet that they already have, or perhaps they purchase, and they train it to perform a task for them. So whether you receive the service animal or you've trained the service animal, it is considered a medical device. So it's like oxygen or wheelchair. This means that you cannot separate the person from their service animal. So no one can separate Joplin and I because it's considered a vital piece of medical equipment. If you personally feel like you were discriminated against, you can visit ada.gov, and I've also put links in the description. So my situation personally was that I needed to fly in April to Virginia from Los Angeles for a family emergency. Cheryl and I only had 3 days to basically book the flight and fly. Cheryl came with me. Cheryl brought Dorian, Cockatiel, who is our pet. And then, of course, I had Joplin guiding me. We flew Alaska Airlines because they are the only airline currently that allows birds as pets to sit in the cabin with you in a carrier. This particular flight was different than any we had taken before because the DOT, Department of Transportation, and the FAA, basically the government, added a lot more language and some new restrictions and regulations for service animals traveling in airports and on planes. One of the new things is that it requires anybody traveling with a service animal to fill out a form, either fill it out online and submit it online, or you can print it out and fill it in and then bring it to the desk at the airport. So just for efficiency's sake, Cheryl helped me fill out the form. However, it is accessible. So if you use a screen reader or you go to fill this out online, you can do it as someone who's blind. Basically, they ask you information about your service animal. So it is your contact information, the veterinarian's contact information, their rabies vaccination information, and then kind of a personal attestation of the behavior and training of your service dog. So you have to attest to the fact that your service animal is trained to perform a task for yourself who has a disability, and that if your animal misbehaves at all, the airline has the right to treat your service animal as a pet. Now, this has always been the case. Airlines could always do this. All of this stuff that is required has always been there. It's just that so many people recently have abused the rule that we now have to attest to this on paper. Now, when we were flying back from Virginia to Los Angeles, we had to fill out a copy of the same form. However, it's not as bad once you filled it out once. They give you a service animal ID number, and I can put that in and it'll pull up the information, so it becomes easier to fill it out. And if we had had a round trip ticket, we would not have had to submit the form again because it goes based off of your reservation number. Cheryl and I were both able to check in online, which is very cool because before, if you had any kind of animal, whether it was a service animal or a pet, you did have to check in at the desk. Some airlines, your check-in time affects your seat on the plane. So a lot of people can check in the night before the flight, and if that affects your boarding group or when you board the plane, it sucks. So we were able to check in online. I personally kind of always go up to the desk because I like to ask for assistance to get through security, especially if I'm by myself. Airports are notoriously impossible to navigate. So we had someone escort us to where security starts. And it's just kind of easier. Often you can get through security faster. You know, you can take them by the arm, or you can sit in a wheelchair, or if you've seen in the airport people who are riding in like the little golf cart thing that's like beep, 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 beep as you go through, and it's just faster and easier. Our journey that day started at about 4:30 in the morning. So we kind of took what we could get as far as a ride share to the airport. At this time, COVID is still a thing. Both of us were not vaccinated. So we actually wore double masks and then face shields as well. Again, due to COVID regulations with the ride share and in general, we sat in the back seat. Now, Joplin and I are used to, and the dogs are trained to sit in the front seat of the car. Normally, I sit right next to the driver, and Joplin gets in and sits in the wheel well in the, like, under the dashboard. According to the seeing eye, that's actually the safest place for the dog in the car as well. So it was a little different for Joplin. She gets a little thrown off, especially when there isn't much room in the back and she kind of just has to like sit on the floor. It's a little weird, but we made it there. Now, we haven't traveled in over a year. So it was anxiety producing. We were both really nervous about traveling because we hadn't been anywhere. We did go into the airport and we stopped because we had a bird and a dog and we're a zoo. We went to the service desk. The agent did check that I had the form on file, and there was no issue with that. It was in the system. And as I mentioned before, you're not required anymore to see an agent, but I just prefer to because it's easier for me to get an escort to the gate. This trip, because Cheryl was going with me, we just had an agent basically lead us to security, and then we made it through on our own. At LAX, the security went pretty smoothly. It was really cute. We walked up and one of the agents took Dorian's carrier. There's a handle and then there's like a rectangular small cage, and Dorian hangs out in there. When the agent took Dorian, Joplin was like started leading me towards that agent kind of after Dorian, like, excuse me, that's our bird? Excuse me, where are you taking my brother? I'm sorry, what? And it was very cute. So Cheryl's had several different security experiences with Dorian. Again, the carrier has to be inspected. Sometimes Cheryl has had to take Dorian out of the carrier. Sometimes they have to put the carrier through the x-ray thing. Sometimes the person just kind of looks at it and says, okay, you're good. Cheryl's learned not to put the food and water in until after you've gone through security. Again, this was pretty smooth. This was somebody knew what they were doing. He actually said he had cocktails at home, but the agent just visually inspected the carrier and Dorian, and then tested Cheryl's hands with the paper roller cloth thing. The way that I go through security with Joplin did not change with the new regulations at all. Basically, there's a protocol, and sometimes the TSA, actually most of the time, the TSA agents don't know what they're doing. Again, remembering they cannot separate you. Sometimes they'll ask to separate you, sometimes they'll ask if you take the dog's harness off. No, none of that occurs. Basically, how I go through security, first of all, they have the sort of circular ones now, where you stand and you put your arms above your head, almost like a football goal. We don't do that. It's the classic, rectangular doorway metal detector. And I go up to it. I have Joplin sit, and I create her leash to be a long leash. I go through first, kind of like sideways, trying to make sure that I don't hit the sides of the metal detector at all. Normally the TSA agent kind of takes my hand and kind of leads me through a little bit. And then once I make it through, I call Joplin to me, and she sets off the metal detector because her harness and her leash, her collar, it all has metal in it. So then what the staff can do is they can pat her down, they can look at her harness, and then same thing as with pets, they check my hands for residue. So it's like the little rolly thing of paper, I guess, of some kind. I think it's like for explosives or something. A minor debacle on the other side, they were inspecting one of my bags. And as someone who's blind, I can make my way to the conveyor belt to go pick up my shoes and my computer and all my stuff again. But I would not have known that they were inspecting my backpack, my carry-on. So I would not have known unless Cheryl had pointed it out. And it turns out that Joplin's wipes were a problem. So like the pet wipes that I use for her were apparently an issue. Then you kind of just try and get out of the way as much as you can. A nice thing to do is to kind of get out of the way, sit down on like one of the benches nearby, and then just kind of collect yourself, make sure you have everything, make sure you have all your service animal stuff, and then you make your way to the gate. Directly from security, we went to the pet relief area and then the human relief area, which is the restroom, and made sure, we were kind of ready for the flight. Once we got to the gate, Cheryl with pet bird and me with service animal, it's just kind of, again, like a double check, or like just to be easier, you go up and you check with the gate agent as well and kind of check in with them and say, I do need extra time to board and sort myself out and everything. So as someone with a disability, I do get to pre-board, which is extremely helpful because, again, I can't see, and it's a lot easier to know exactly where my bag is and, have time to make sure Joplin's all settled and we're in the right seats and everything. We pre-boarded, and we had purchased the tickets, so you're guaranteed to have a seat, an extra seat in your row. No one will sit with you. This flight in particular wasn't very full, so it was cool because we ended up having the row in front of us and the row behind us and the seats next to us empty as well. So I just felt like we kind of bought out the plane and were able to feel a little bit better about the whole virus on a plane thing. So on the plane, Joplin goes at my feet. So she is my carry-on that goes under the seat in front of you. And Dorian's carrier fits at Cheryl's feet as well. Joplin, this trip, again, we haven't traveled for over a year, and she and I are used to traveling quite a bit. So she was really restless this particular trip. She was kind of up and down. The seats also had a little more room because of what we paid for to have the extra seat. So I think she just was like, oh, I kind of have a little bit more space, and oh, are we done yet? She never barks or disturbs anybody or anything like that, but she normally curls up at my feet and goes right to sleep on the plane. And this time she was a little kind of antsy. So besides, where does dog go on plane with you? She goes under the seat in front of me. A lot of people want to offer you the bulkhead, which is the front of the plane where there's nobody in front of you. It's like a larger space, and then the wall. That's actually not good because, again, they have too much room. So unless your dog is very big and is not going to fit under the seat in front of you, it's not necessary to have the bulkhead. The other question is, how does your dog not go to the bathroom for the entire time? I actually fast Joplin, meaning that kind of starting the day before, I feed her less and less. And then the day of, she fasts, so I don't give her her food. I give her a limited amount of water. And then in the airport, you try and use the pet relief area when you can. And basically, it sounds really cruel, like, oh, you're not feeding your dog. But it is only for a little while. They will be fine. That ensures that we're not nervous about she's gonna need to go potty on the plane. When she was a puppy, she did that on me a couple times while walking in the airport. She was like, oh, I kind of have to potty anyway. So after a while, I figured out what's a good combination of fasting for her. She's a lab retriever anyway, so she always looks starving no matter what I do. I could have just fed her like 3 cups of food and she would look at you like she's starving to death. And it's the way that, you know, they're able to control themselves, and nobody's has to be worried about it. So once we stayed with my family for a little while, on the way back, it was pretty smooth sailing again. Cheryl and I flew out of Dulles International Airport, and we're both kind of from that area, so we know that airport really well. The only slight hiccup was security. There was one TSA agent who seemed to know what he was doing, and he came up to Cheryl first and was like, okay, you guys wait here. I'll take the bird. And so Cheryl went with him, and he kind of took care of that because he knew what he was doing. But while I was waiting, standing there, another agent decided to come up to me. And first of all, I didn't know he was talking to me. If you think about someone who's blind, I can't see. So if you are in a crowded area and you just start saying like, ma'am, excuse me, ma'am, I don't know that you're talking to me. So finally I just said, I'm sorry, are you talking to me? And he was like, yes, you're gonna come this way. And he was much more uncomfortable with what was happening. And he did say, so can you take the dog's harness off so we can, and I was like, no. And then I gave him the speech, which I said before. You explain to them that the dog sits, you go through, you call the dog to you, and then they can pat the dog down and test your hands, whatever. So by the time I was getting my hands tested and stuff, the other guy had come back over and was basically, you know, helping this terrified individual who was trying to interact with a blind woman and a dog. We did have another service dog on the plane. Cheryl was describing that it was a very cute dog. It was very cute, but it did kind of bark a few times, and they were in the bulkhead, so they did decide to stay in the front row. So when we got off the plane, we were both in the pet relief area, and I did ask, I was like, oh, is that a service dog? And the guy just kind of mumbled like, and I was like, okay. And not like I'm gonna like call you out, but yeah, it's a little annoying sometimes. But we got our stuff and again, took a ride share back instead of like a shuttle and a bus and just tried to pay the extra to get directly home. It was pretty late. That was kind of our airline adventures with the new regulations. It could have been a lot more painful. I honestly thought it might be worse, but the FAA and the DOT did really take into account a lot of the public comment that went into this. If you are curious about how it works going through an airport with a guide dog, the Seeing Eye and Guide Dogs of America put out an instructional video for airport staff and TSA agents on how to best help blind travelers with guide dogs. And I have linked that in the description as well. I hope that this video has been helpful and informative, especially since most of us have not been traveling since the rules went into effect. So if you guys have learned something new, please consider liking this video and subscribing. I'm hoping to continue putting out videos about once a month. Life's been hard, y'all. Let me know in the comments below if you liked this story time, and if you guys want me to do an additional video about how I feel about registries and certifications and fake service animals. Or you know what? If you personally have another take on that, let me know. So thanks everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.